Beatrice Wawera, currently in Kenya. I'm selling fruits for now. I'm 23 years old, but I'm looking forward to raising awareness on intersex persons in our country, Kenya, seeing that there is no awareness of intersex kind. When I was born, my parents knew that I was an intersex. At that particular time when I was young, my mom took me to a hospital that is in Kenyatta National Hospital. And the doctor said that there is a particular age that they want me to reach, and then they will decide on which gender that I live to be.
My name is Dr. David Kimani. I'm a consultant urologist working for Kenyatta National Hospital and also in private practice. Urology generally entails the treatment of male reproductive system plus all urological conditions for both men and women. So the gynae, because you are usually confused with the gynae, the gynecologists usually deal with the female reproductive system. So urological issues affecting women are a domain of urologists. So intersex is a scenario where it's very difficult looking at the morphology, the body formation of somebody. It becomes difficult to say you are male or you are female, because you have features that look like they are female or they look like they are male, or a combination of both in different forms. So we can't tell, are you a male, are you a female? Because as we know, gender is either you are a male or female. You don't have something in between. But now intersex comes in between. You have somebody who has the male reproductive organs but has maybe internal female organs, or they resemble the female organs and vice versa. That's what intersex is all about. Transgender, on the other hand, is very different. You have somebody whom you can classically tell this is a man. He has a male organ, he has testes and everything, but he perceives himself as a woman, or the converse, where you have somebody whose gender is clearly female, but they perceive themselves as men. That is now what is transgender, which is different from intersex.
Now, they say that I am supposed to reach at the adolescent stage. And at this particular stage, they will check out on the hormone that is I, and also my body appearance. That one will help them decide on whom to be. I included. Genetically, let me say, the hormone that is I is my male hormone. But if you come to my body, you can see it's like I'm a lady. And I was also raised as a lady, and I would love to become a lady. And everything, including my body shape and everything, is of a lady. So that is why I choose to be a lady. And it is very easier to change it, because it is only the hormone, the female hormone, that will be introduced to my body, and it will suppress the male hormone.
Our current advice: do not allocate a gender alone if you have not discussed it with the doctors, and doctors who understand these issues. Like you've said, so many things can go wrong from that single act. The first thing that we always ask when you have this a child with an ambiguous genitalia is to exclude what are called life-threatening conditions. Some of these ambiguous genitalia are associated with life-threatening conditions, like the congenital adrenal hyperplasia, where you don't have cortisol. So you start losing salt, because cortisol is meant, those enzymes are meant, those hormones are meant to absorb salt, and with salt comes water. So if you're not able to do that, that child is going to waste off, and they're going to get hypovolemic, they're going to lose their blood pressure, and they die. So we are supposed to ensure that we don't have those life-threatening issues. So we address them if they exist. If we need to give you cortisol, we give you cortisol. Then number two, we now want to establish the gender. We can go into history. We start with the history. Do you have a family history of infertility? Maybe your mother was on hormones during the time that you are conceived. Maybe they are athletes and they were trying to cheat and they were taking male hormones, for example. Were you exposed to problems around the time of conception? So a general background check will go a long way. Number two, we now go to the physical examination. And in the physical examination, for a boy, we are interested in mainly the testes. Do we have testes? And if they are not there, is it that they are internal? For example, an undecided testis. We may do a scan to see whether those testes are available or not. And then number two, do you have internal organs? Because there's what we see. As we sit here, we can't see your uterus, we can't see your cervix, we can't see your ovaries. Are they there? So we may require either to do a rectal examination to feel for the cervix, or we may be required to do an ultrasound, or we are supposed to do, say, a laparoscopy, where you put in a small camera, have a look in the abdomen and see, do you have formed internal genitalia? If you are still not sure, we can ask for genetic testing. So we demonstrate, do we have the X chromosome, do we have the Y chromosome? So genetically, are you a male, or are you female, or there are these other, we call them mosaics, like what you call XXY, X0. So there are many other genetic abnormalities that can occur. And then once we have reassessed all this, then we ask ourselves, what gender should we allocate this patient? And in agreement with the patient, we allocate the gender. Sometimes we may require to do gender reassignment surgeries or gender assignment surgeries. So, for example, if you have an undecided testis, it may be easy to operate and bring down the testis. If you may have a hypospadia where they have an opening here of the urethra, we can move it to move up. You may have, if it's a female, there's the issue of labial fusion. Sometimes the labia comes and closes off the area, so you can't see the introitus, so we can do labial separation. And we see what's going to happen. Some of those surgeries are done at that particular time. Others may require to be done much later. For example, if we think that we have assigned a female sex and you have a testis, we may require to remove the testis.
I noticed I am different when I was 6 years old, because I used to pray aloud with my sisters, my cousins, and also my schoolmate. And we even used to bathe together, so I could check and see they are not like me. And so I took a step of asking my grandmother, who at that particular time was the one who was staying with me. So I took a particular time of asking her, why am I the way I am? And I think because of depression, she did not answer me that particular time. She just told me I'm okay. So as I was growing up, I just went to my mom and my aunt, and I asked them why I am the way I am. But they told me I am an intersex, but one day I'll be the person that I desire to be. So I came to realize I'm different when I was 7 years old. At that particular time, in our community, bearing an intersex kid, people say that it is out of curse or a curse. So I think my grandmother didn't want to be associated with that part. That a daughter has got a child out of prostitution, or a daughter has got a child out of curse. So I think she was depressed, and also on my side, she saw as if I'll get depressed. So she tried to save me. I think being called an intersex has a meaning, and being called an intersex, it means that you are both. You are a lady and you are a man, so you are both. You consist of the two parts. Yeah, that's what makes a person to become an intersex.
In an attempt to mitigate these issues of stigma against these intersex individuals, the WHO and other organizations came up with the terminology of disorders of sex differentiation. Actually, that's the correct terminology. They're called disorders of sex differentiations, also called DSDs in medical terms, which is a polite way of saying that we have a problem with defining the gender, as it were. But intersex, remember, is a whole spectrum of disorders. And in the spectrum of disorders, some with very subtle issues like a breast enlargement, or maybe a female with beards, but everything else is female, to now the complete opposite, where somebody shares both male and female reproductive systems, those who used to be called the true hermaphrodites. So in a way of trying to capture the whole range of things, then we have found the term intersex as an English word, but for medical terminology, disorders of sexual differentiation, because it's actually, as the name suggests, it's actually a disorder of sexual differentiation.
When I realized I was an intersex, it took a different part of my life. The first thing, it was the part of how I lived. Now I knew that I'll be living differently. And I tried at that particular time, I tried to just live like a girl. And yes, let me say it changed a lot, even in how people picked me. It changed a lot my life. As I was growing up, let me first say that stigma is real. Let me say, like in my primary school, life was very smooth, because at that particular time no one knew that Betty is an intersex. So life was a bit smooth. But high school, some people knew. Because because I am both, so both took part in me. What do I mean when I say both took part in me? Like on the side of games, let me say I was a bit muscular, so I could play like men games, so I could play football. So girls were like, why is it Betty playing football? And she's playing it in a hand way, like a man.
Yeah. I've not seen toilets for intersex here in Kenya.
So I made that image for you.
Okay.
And it's disappearing out. We need to understand how do we form males and how do we form females. Now, it all starts from what we call our chromosomal makeup, which is what is called genetic sex or chromosomal sex. A male has 46 chromosomes, which are called somatic chromosomes, plus an X and a Y chromosome. The X and the Y are called sex chromosomes. So we have body chromosomes and sex chromosomes. So a male have an X and a Y, whereas a female has 2 X's. So if by genetics you have an XY, you are genetically a male. If you have an XX, you are genetically a female. But now it gets interesting. Now, when you have the genetic, you remember we inherit one of the 2 from our parents. The male will give either an X or a Y chromosome. The female will always give an X chromosome. So if the male actually who determines the sex of an individual, and it's important because sometimes male are the ones who accuse the women of giving him only girls, and yet he's the donor of the X chromosome. The female will always donate the X chromosome. Then the male will either donate an X or an Y. So if he donates a Y, you now have X plus Y. If you donate an X, it becomes an X plus X, which is the female. Now, what happens is that once you now have their chromosomal sex or genetic sex, then the next thing is, how do we form the male or the female organs? It all starts at around 6-7 weeks of intrauterine life, when the baby is within the uterus. So what happens is that as long as you have a Y chromosome that is forming in you, you are going to form a testis. So there is within that Y chromosome, there is what is called the sex-determining region of that Y chromosome. In that region, as long as it is functioning well, usually when you are born with a gonad that can go either way. It can become an ovary, it can become a testis. But if you have the Y chromosome with the sex-determining region intact and working very well, then your primary gonad transforms into a testis. Once you have formed a testis, the testis is known to produce the male hormone testosterone. So once you have formed the testosterone acts on the male part, the male component of this gonad that was undifferentiated to make male sexual characteristics. And this goes on all the way into puberty, up to the time of puberty, because that hormone continues to work. That's why you have organ enlargement. That's why you have the sound break. That's when you have the beards. That will come much later. But the effect starts in utero. Now, in the absence of that Y chromosome, as long as that sex determining region is not there, the default settings is that you're going to become a female. So if you have a 46XY, but the Y is not functional, it's abnormal, then automatically you form a female. So that is now what is called the morphological or the phenotypic gender. So what happens is the gender, the organs that were supposed to have involuted, they have supposed to have gone, because if you have the Y and you're going to form the male, it means the female parts that were supposed to be formed the female must regress. And the other hormones that are produced called Morean inhibiting substances, some chemicals that are produced to inhibit the female system such that you only blossom as a man. In the absence of the Y, then you blossom as a female with the male genitalia regressing. When you have the Y and the Y is not functional or partially functional, you can form what's called an ovotestis, which is a combination of an ovary and a testis. And those are the patients who are now used to be called the true hermaphrodites. So those ones are very characteristic because they will have male functions, male organs, for example, but the internal organs are female, or the vice versa. Now comes the third part about it. You may have morphologically you are a boy, or morphologically you are indeterminate, but your parents called you Joroge. They assigned a gender. So there is a sex of rearing. So we brought you up, we called you this name. But supposing you are wrong, you might have been a female, but you looked and mother was desperate to get a boy, and now they have an intersex child. Her mind, you block everything out and say, my child is called Joroge. And now Joroge, this male child, grows with that name. But genetically, they may be female. Phenotypically, they may be female or they may be in between. And that's where the conflict arises. Now, once you are brought up, that's a sex of rearing. Now, you now mature into an adult. And as an adult, you identify what you are. You find yourself becoming a girl who likes climbing trees, who likes playing with boys, because in your mind, you think, or the imprint is that of a female. Supposing we erred in childhood and allocated you the male gender, and you are meant to be female. So you now start acting different from the name that we gave you.
On the side of periods and menstruation, mine did not occur because it's like my male hormone was high. And let me say, I pretended in school to survive. So these are the kind of stigma, the kind of stigma that people face. And now, growing as an intersex, it means you are growing both. So particularly here, it's about hormones reacting. And in this case, there must be a hormone that is high. And on my case, I usually tell people that yes, my body grew as a lady, but my male hormone was high. So this was a bit difficult to live with. And in primary school, it was fine because people didn't know. But in high school, let me say, because of the love of games, people knew.